Hey, welcome back to EDH on a Budget. I'm your host Iceman, and today we're going to be going over 5 vehicles that have either reduced in price or have just remained low in price, and I think they would be good adds to your deck. So, for the first vehicle, we have Conqueror's Galleon. This is Most of these are colorless and can be put into any deck. This one is a 4 mana vehicle with 210 stats if you crew it for 4. So when you crew something for 4, you just need to have power 4 or more creatures, and you tap it, and then the artifact becomes a creature. So if you got two, one or just one 4 power creature, it just has to add up to 4 or more. So it doesn't have to be exactly 4. The ability says when Conqueror's Galleon attacks, exile it at the end of combat. So that's after damage is dealt and before your second main phase. Your post combat main phase. Then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So it's going to come back to the battlefield untapped as a land. Conqueror's Foothold is the land that is named. And it just taps for a colorless, which isn't, great, but it's certainly ramp in that aspect, that you're getting an additional land, and the 210 stats is probably not going to die. The other abilities are, some of them are a little high costed, but it adds a lot of flexibility, and the base it's just a land. So here are the other ones. Pay 2, tap, draw, and discard a card. Pay 4, tap, draw a card. Pay 6, tap, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So those are all things you can do on your opponent's turns if you're, wanting to hold up some interaction and nothing happens. So you're just like, I don't want to waste a removal spell, but I can draw a card, or I can bring this card from the graveyard to the hand that I want back. This is only 63 cents. Next up, we have Mighty Servant of Luco. It costs 3 mana. The actual monetary cost is 15 cents. Super cheap. And its stats are 6/6, 6 power and toughness, and then you crew it for 4. Has trample and ward, discard a card. Nobody wants to discard a card. I don't think anybody's going to target this to remove it unless they're desperate. Or if they just have so many cards, it doesn't matter. This has whenever Mighty Servant of Luco becomes crewed for the first time each turn, if it was crewed by exactly 2 or more creatures, or exactly 2 creatures, it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw 2 cards until end of turn. So you do need to crew it with exactly 2 creatures for this to work. It does not have to be 2/2. It could be 3 and a 1 power creature. It could be 5 and 0 powered creature. I mean, it doesn't have to equal 4. You just have to crew it with 2 for it to get that effect. And it dealing combat damage is going to be so easy when it's a 6/6 with trample. Yeah, you're not going to chump block this. It's going to get through. It's going to trigger. You're going to draw 2 cards every turn you attack with this. Yes, you have to tap 2 creatures, so that might be a slight hindrance, but if you're going to play decks that have lots of creatures, token decks, even aristocrat decks usually have lots of creatures. You just need to have a couple of zombies. Not a problem at all. Next up, we have Weatherlight. It is a 62-cent card. This is a legendary artifact vehicle with 4/5 stats, and it costs 4. Whenever Weatherlight deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a historic card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. Historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So, artifact decks should love this. Crew 3 is pretty easy to get. Many of your commanders are going to have 3 power or more, so you just kind of want that commander to come out by turn 5 at the latest. Comes out before this, that's fine too. Digging 5 cards is pretty deep. As long as your mana rocks are plentiful, so I wouldn't run this in a green landfall deck. I would run this in decks that have artifact synergies and care about your mana rocks, or maybe you could put this in a saga deck. I could see this in a saga deck. You're probably going to hit when you combine mana rocks and sagas, and then the few incidental legendary creatures that are in there. You can make it so it's a very often you're going to hit it. And combat damage with a flyer is not a problem. You're more than likely going to have an opponent that is not going to have any reach or flying creatures. Next up, we have Magmatic Galleon for 3 red. This artifact vehicle crews for 2 and has 5/5 stats. It has, this card costs 22 cents, and this card has 2 abilities. When Magmatic Galleon enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls. The second ability is whenever one or more creatures your opponents control are dealt excess non-combat damage, create a treasure token. So, more than likely when you play this card, you're going to choose something that has toughness 4 or less, just so you can get that treasure and get that train going right away. You could, if it was a problematic creature, just deal 5 damage and get rid of it. That's fine. 5/5 stats, not bad. Pretty good blocker, especially the fact that it only takes crew 2. The nice thing about these vehicles is they will survive the creature board wipes that your opponents play, because it goes back to being an artifact at the end of your turn. At the end of the turn, and your opponents will have to either specifically remove this artifact or all artifacts. But regardless, this kind of removal in red is very common. Red is like all about damaging creatures with their removal, and there's many even mass board wipes for red that just deal with damage. So you'll still only get 1, because it's whenever 1 or more of your opponent's creatures are dealt excess damage, but it doesn't say from a card or effect you control. So if somebody else is playing red and they happen to remove a creature that one of your opponents have with a damage based effect, that's going to non-combat, obviously, that's going to create treasure. This is just going to stick around, generate some treasures, and the high 5 mana cost isn't going to seem so bad when you're using this to close games and rampart with the treasures. Especially when you consider like a 5 mana removal spell in red generally is going to cost you about 3 mana, 2 mana. So if you kind of subtract that from this, you subtract the fact that you're probably getting a treasure, 2 crew costs for a 5/5 creature isn't bad either. Red has lots of ways to also damage creatures incidentally and repeatedly. So this is just a wonderful card that's going to fit into many of your red decks. And last but not least, Esika's Chariot has dropped in price. It is now a 72-cent card. This is a legendary artifact vehicle that costs 3 in a green. Its stats are 4/4, crew 4, which seems high, especially compared to these other ones that I'm talking about. But when it enters the battlefield, it creates 2 green cat creature tokens. Whenever Esika's Chariot attacks, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. So this provides the creatures that you need to crew this to attack with it. So the crew 4 doesn't quite matter so much in that aspect, and you're always going to, at the minimum, get a copy of one of those creatures, those 2/2 creatures, which is kind of the floor. It's I wouldn't say that's fantastic, but it's a pretty good floor. Like that's pretty high up there in my opinion. It is flexible enough that if you had some artifact tokens like say treasure, clues, junk, attacking could create a copy of those tokens as well. There have been so many printed cards recently that have ways to create tokens, whether it's offspring or some crazy Eldrazi's create copies. There's lots of blue cards that create copies. Even red cards create copies. I mean, the only colors that. Nope, nope. All the colors create copies. Even white creates token creature copies. Black creates token creature copies all the time. So that's even red. So yeah, all the colors are great at creating copies of, or creating tokens that this can copy. So I wouldn't say this card's gonna like win you the game, but it's gonna be an engine that is going to have to be dealt with at some point. Otherwise, it will lead to you pulling out ahead and gaining the advantage over time. And that is it. Thanks for watching. You rock.